Well, let's jump into the habitats. There are 4 major features that you need to look at, and these are vegetation, slope, drainage, and soil. And the different conditions of each of those factors is going to help you understand that particular habitat. So vegetation. So vegetation is a factor. The different conditions are these types of vegetation. First of all, valley meadow. Valley meadows are open areas dominated by herbs, mostly wildflowers, or grasses. Oak hickory forest. These forests are on drier sites, tending to be more open than other forests, and dominated by species of oak and or hickory, but of course there will be other species of trees in those forests as well. Cove forests. These are what we might call richer, moist forests. They occur especially in valleys and ravines of mountains and foothills. They tend to be dominated by tulip poplar, American beech, and species of maple. Next is birch forests. These are forests that are dominated by mostly yellow birch, and they occur higher up in the mountains than either the cove forest or the oak hickory forest, basically replacing those 2 forests as you go up the mountains. And as you go up the mountain, you're going to basically become moister, so you don't have quite the difference between moist and dry forests that you do a little bit lower down. Next are conifer forests. As you go high in the mountains, you will encounter conifer forest dominated by species of mostly spruce and fir. And finally are the heath balls. Often on the high mountains at the tops, you will find what look like bare areas, and these will be dominated by heath family shrubs as well as herbs and grasses. They are areas that are windswept and generally very snowy and cold in the winter. So that's why you have that sort of environment at the tops of the mountains. So those are the vegetation types. Now let's go to slope and look at the conditions of slope. We have slope angle. Is it a steep slope or is it nearly flat? That will affect a lot of different aspects of the habitat. What is the facing direction? Is it north, south, east, or west? This affects the amount of sunlight exposure, evaporation, and hence moisture availability. So if you're on a north-facing slope, it's going to be more shaded, cooler, moister. Let's say a south-facing slope, which will be warmer and have more evaporation and so on. Then there are the conditions of the stream valley topography, all part of slope. So you can have a bluff base, so a very steep slope coming down, and then dropping into a sort of almost a flat area. But at the base of this bluff, you will have rich accumulation of soil and a lot of water draining down through the rocks. So generally a very rich environment and usually very shaded. And that is versus a stream terrace. So where the stream is actually flooded from time to time, then you'll have a flat area, and it will not be so much rich soil falling down from the bluff, but it will be soil that will be deposited from the stream when it floods. So it'll be a mixture of soil, might be clays, silt, gravel, or even boulders. And the water there will be often water moving up from the water table below. So that's slope. Next we have drainage. Drainage is how much water is available or is persisting in the soil. You can have soils that are flooded either all year round or part of the year. There can be seepy areas. This would be areas where water is dripping down through crevices in bedrock that's exposed, or it can be seeping up from an area under the soil where water's coming out of the rocks. You have just generally moist soils. These are water is not constantly standing or seeping, but it is also not drying out quickly after rain, so you have a steady supply of moisture in the soil. Well-drained soils are those that are moist after rains, but then will gradually dry out between rains. And then finally you have well-drained soils, dry with rapid drainage. And these are soils that are basically unable to hold on water for any length of time after the rain has given them a little bit of moisture. So that's drainage. And then finally, the actual soil types. Soil can go in a range going from acidic to basic, or you can say acidic to alkaline. So acidic would be soils that are especially sandy or maybe peaty, that is, have lots of organic material that's not rotting, that have organic acids in them. At the other end are basic or alkaline soils. These would tend to be heavy clay soils. And then in the middle would be neutral soils, and those would be the more fertile soils, generally with lots of humus. And by humus, what we mean is that dark material that develops after the leaves have rotted and other things, the other organic materials have rotted away to make that dark organic material in the soil. There's soil texture. Is the soil rocky, clay, sandy, or silty? And also there's the organic content of the soil, how much humus is in the soil. So if it's a humic soil, it will have a sort of almost a darker black top layer to the soil, meaning it's fertile. And that, again, is from the decaying leaves and such. Or is it a peaty soil in terms of the organic content? Is it thick layer of unrotted material because it's of standing water, this sort of thing? So undecayed vegetation would be peaty. So that is then the four major factors of habitats: vegetation, slope, drainage, and soils. And finally, we said the third part of classification, habitats, and traits is traits. So now this next portion is going to be spending now quite a bit of time talking about the terms that explain the traits. So to understand the description of a plant or plant families or plant species, you need to understand the definitions of terms used in these descriptions. Now I'm going to try to keep it to a minimum of botanical terms in this part, and also in the field and in the notes. But there are certain terms that you really need to understand to be able to get a handle on what we're looking at, and in terms of what makes one species different from another. We'll begin by talking about the vegetative traits and those terms, basically leaves and stems. So we begin with leaves. The first part is the blade, and that's the expanded flat part. The stalk of a leaf is called a petiole, and sometimes the petiole is missing, so that the blade is actually sitting directly on the stem. And then the base of the leaf, that is generally the base of the petiole, or the base of a blade if it's sitting directly on the stem, can be elaborated into what looks like a small leafy structure itself called a stipule. Now, in trying to determine what structure is really a leaf, because remember we're going to have what are called compound leaves that looks like a branch with leaves on it, but it's actually a single leaf. So to determine what really is a leaf, what you need to do is look at the base of the leaf, that is where the petiole attaches, or where the blade attaches to the stem. and see if there is a bud or a branch that forms in the angle between the leaf, that is between the leaf base of the, say, the petiole, the angle between that and the stem. If there is a bud or a branch there in that angle, then everything from the stem up is a leaf. It's one leaf. Now, in this example, what we're looking at is a close-up now of the stipules and a bud. So the stipules are marked with blue arrows, the bud with red. The stipules of this plant, this is a red bud, are fairly small, but they are covering most of the bud. So it's hard to see the bud. It's a little red structure barely sticking out there. Now, further down the stem, you'll see that the bud is quite obvious, but the stipules are gone, but they have left stipule scars. Or on this, you only see one side, so you see a stipule scar near the base of that bud. So the bud is there, pointing out that what is next to that bud is a whole leaf. So there we have a leaf with all three, blade, petiole, and stipules. Next, let's look at a leaf that is lacking stipules. Okay, it has a blade, and it has a petiole, and if you look at the base of the petiole, there you'll see a very small bud that has formed between the petiole base and the stem. So a leaf missing stipules. Next is a leaf that has a blade and it has stipules, but it has no petiole. Okay, in fact, in this picture, you'll see that there are two leaves, one on each side of the stem. And also, there is a branch that is formed in the angle between each leaf and the stem. And there you see the stipule, but it is, instead of being a stipule for each leaf on that side, they are basically fused as a single stipule on that side of the stem. And on the other side of the stem is another stipule shared by the leaves on that side. Okay, and then here is a leaf missing both stipules and petiole. Just the blade is attached directly to the stem, and in the angle between the leaf and the stem you see a branch, saying that yes, that indeed that is just a leaf. So there you have all the combinations for leaves. Leaves with all three, a leaf missing stipules, a leaf missing petiole, and a leaf without petiole or stipule.